Welcome to Jump School. I'm your host, Ihsaan Ali, aka the StyleJumper. On this podcast, you'll learn a ton of things. We'll talk about style, confidence, etiquette, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Today's episode was brought to you by my new book, Why Style Matters, The Mindset of Dressing Well and How It Impacts Your Life. To get your autographed copy, click the link in the description. Today's guest is world-traveled, binge-wear blogger, tailoring enthusiast, style aficionado, the curated man himself, Wale Soluade, episode 17. The following is an excerpt from Instagram Live. Let's go.
Brother.
Hey, what's going on?
What's up, bro? How you doing?
Trying to live the dream.
Man, you know I want to be like you when I grow up. Fly as you are. Come on now.
I don't know about that, man. I'm trying to get my life situation right.
Hey, man, take your time. How's the weather out there?
Starting to get cold. This is my favorite time of year, fall, because it's like, all the layering that you get to do.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this for a while, so.
It's my favorite season, too. I love the layers. I love the colors of the fall. You know, you can put on some pops of color.
Yeah.
Throw in those earth tones, blend in with the leaves. You know what I'm saying? You just, that chocolate, man. We turn to the bark,
man.
throw the leaf colors on, and we in there.
I usually rock earth tones all year round, but there's no better time of year for it.
That's right, than the fall.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I want to thank you so much for hopping on tonight here at Jump School. It's an honor. I've been following you for quite some time. And for those who don't know, this brother is so fly. You know, it's few people that I take notes. It's few people that I'm like, ooh, I need to write this one down. So I really appreciate you coming on board. So let's get it started, man. So tell us a little bit about yourself and where'd you grow up and your origin story. Like, how did you come to become a curated man?
Yeah, so I grew up in Nigeria, as a matter of fact. I was born there. That's where my family's from. I spent pretty much all of my childhood there, and when I turned 16, I moved to the U.S. to go to college, and so kind of early start, but I ended up meeting my wife while I was here in college, and that's kind of how I ended up staying in the U.S. Because my original plan was, go get the degree, go back home, and just kind of do life from there. But she changed the trajectory of that, and no complaints whatsoever, and it's really been the experience, I think, has just been one where I've gone with the flow, with kind of what life has had to offer. And I can honestly say, even though there's some hot stuff, in Nigeria and in Africa when it comes to style and fashion and all of that, I think the one advantage of living here in the U.S. for me is essentially just that access, right? So I can get access to a variety of things with relative ease, and so that's been kind of cool just in the time that I've been here.
Well, tell me, growing up in Nigeria, most of us don't know a lot about, obviously we know about the mother continent, but a lot of us don't really know about style in specific countries, regions of those countries. Yeah. So what is one of the things that you would say that really influenced you from Nigeria when it comes to your style, your taste? Because obviously there's colors, there's the fit, all those different things that influence you. So tell us about that.
I think for me, Nigerians, when it comes down to just the idea of style and dressing well, like it is something that they take seriously, right? So, I remember going to parties growing up, and you knew that people were going all in, like that. The idea of picking out your own fabrics and all of that was not unusual, right? When people would have parties, especially big parties, right? Like there would be a certain fabric that folks select, whether every member of the family is wearing that same fabric. But then, you know, people get their stuff made. And so you think about custom clothing and made to measure and all of that. Like, yeah, we all got the same fabric, but then people, you know, have their own tailor that they take stuff to, and everything is cut and made for them. And so the idea of fit was sort of an organic part of it, because this stuff was being made for you anyway, right? It wasn't like you're going somewhere and buying ready-made clothing. And so to me, that translates to this idea of tailoring as we know it, that it almost sort of harkens back to a point in time in history where that was the only way that you got clothes, right? That it wasn't there were no department stores necessarily, and the ones that did come around, it was still that same experience of you're going in there, you're picking out the fabric you want, but it has to be made for you, right? So that was something that I grew up with in terms of traditional clothing that we would wear, and the occasion of getting dressed. Like when I seriously, like, took it seriously, you know.
Yeah.
Making sure the shoes is right, the bags is right, all of that. And so I think it definitely influences and still continues to influence sort of my perspective on it.
So when you came over here at 16, first of all, you must have been a smart student to be going out to college at 16 years old. So what was that like, man? You was a baby, man, you know, rolling up here, you know, straight up. Was it like a coming to America experience? Did you step off the plane, fly, and killed him from the beginning? Or what was that like?
I wish, man. I wish. Like, you know, one thing, my dad, he is where I would say 95% of my love for tailoring comes in. Like, he was clean. Like, you know, even till today, the man's closet is just ridiculous. Like, apparently when I left home, like, he took my bedroom closet and still, you know, filled it with his stuff, right? And so, you know, it was an interesting experience for me, because when you think about those formative years, that whole 15, 16 thing, like, I was essentially coming and being on my own. So the time that I'd be paying closer attention to, you know, what he's wearing and how he's wearing it, and just style as a whole, I was here. I was kind of, you know, here on my own and kind of navigating things. So, you know, there definitely was a lot of kind of initially trying to assimilate those first couple of years. Like, okay, you know, what all the Americans wearing, you know, the oversized jerseys and all of that. But I always had sort of that passion for tailoring. And so when I would change out, like, there was actually a nickname that some folks on campus had for me when I would change out of, like, the shirt and tie or sort of the more tailored clothing into a jersey or a sweatsuit or something. They're like, "Oh, the Wale's here." And
the Wale.
I was like, I don't know what that is, but, you know, so those first couple of years, it was, you know, the evolution was kind of gradual to, okay, this is cool, but I feel more comfortable dressing like this, right? And interestingly enough, it wasn't till last year where I've finally got rid of, you know, some of my first suits from college. It was like, you know, I held on to them, sentimental value and all of that. But it was a reminder, like, okay, this is something that, you know, I've been into for a while, and laying those suits out next to the ones that I have now, like, you see the evolution, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not 4 buttons down, pants leg this wide anymore, you know. And it's like it was cool to be able to look at that journey. And that's, you know, to me, it's very, very much a journey. Like, I'll tell you, I'm still always trying new things when it comes to my personal style. Like, you know, there's a picture somewhere on my Instagram account where I have on like this whole, I mean, it's essentially a coordinating, you know, shirt and trousers in this like leaf print, right? And it's just all over with, you know, a little bandana. And I love that kind of stuff. Like sometimes just, I guess to me, it's like a version of loungewear, like just being able to relax, right? But, you know, I think style is something that is constantly being refined, or should constantly be refined, and kind of get to that point where you're like, okay, you know, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And it makes, you know, the idea of shopping and all that stuff a lot easier over time.
Yeah. Did that print fit that you really liked? Did it remind you of home?
Oh yeah, I mean, the picture was actually taken at home. I was in Nigeria with my wife and daughter, and it was literally taken in front of my parents' house.
Wow, that's what's up, man.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, so you're 16 years old. You get to the States. Where did you end up landing? Because I think when we get to, well, for me, like for instance, I left home at 21 from the down south and moved to Cali. You know what I mean? So it was like you see that style there, and then how do you incorporate your sensibility of style in that environment? You know what I mean? So where did you end up landing, and how was that? How did you bring that through line together from coming from Nigeria out to where you ended up landing?
So I actually ended up landing in St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I still am now. And so, you know, as you can imagine, I had family here, and that's actually how I ended up in Missouri, period. My uncle had immigrated to the U.S. like a number of years before, and so pretty established. And, you know, again, 16, my parents are like, nah, you going somewhere where there's family in case, you know, someone needs to look out for you or whatever. Sure. You have somewhere to go on summer breaks and all of that. And so, you know, you land in St. Louis, Missouri, and even till today, you know, there's still a lot of debate about sort of style sensibility in St. Louis, right? Like you're talking full on Midwest, and not even Chicago Midwest. You know, people make the unfortunate joke about flyover country, but if the actual history of St. Louis is that it used to be one of the major hubs for clothing manufacturing and tailoring in the U.S., you know, but of course all of that kind of went away over time. So you get into an environment where, unfortunately, you have people who, from a societal cultural perspective, think it's okay to wear shorts and flip-flops to a nice dinner, right? And I will say that I've seen a little bit of a resurgence, but it's still not like, oh, you know, you in a city like Chicago or LA or wherever, where, you know, you can walk down the street at any given point in time and know, oh, these folks care about the way they look, right? And so, you know, it's still a little bit of that dichotomy that is happening here, but it's kind of cool because it's given me opportunities to meet some people who are really, really into style, right? And not fashion, but style. Like they're really into, you know, what they're wearing, why they're wearing it, how it's supposed to fit, and just kind of that evolution. So it's interesting, you know, again, being able to draw things just from different experiences. There was one time where I wore like a pair of white high-waisted Gurkha shorts, right? And I'm just strolling through the mall like, this is regular for me. And people are like, the hell is this dude wearing?
Yeah, you look like an alien, right?
Yeah, but you know, I'm just kind of like, even if it's one person that goes, huh, let me go find out what that is. Like, I'm like, that's all that matters, you know, and I'm comfortable, so that's what it boils down to.
So when you talked about style and fashion, break that down, because I think a lot of guys, they use style and fashion interchangeably, but I personally believe, and I think you do too, is that they're two different things.
Oh, yeah.
So what, from your perspective, how do you separate the two? What is the difference between style, someone who has great style, and someone who's fashionable?
Yeah. You know, I have this thing that I believe, or that is kind of always in the back of my head. Like, I want to be able to look at a picture of myself today, 40 years from now, and not be embarrassed by what I'm wearing in that picture. Mm-hmm. Or be like, I would never wear that. And to me, that's kind of where style is captured, that you find this thing that is timeless and that is yours, right? That it's not driven by what's hot or what's not. Like, you know, you see the whole, like, Gurkha shorts and pants right now. Like, that is a piece of timeless, stylish tailoring, but at some point in time, it was deemed not fashionable. Mm-hmm. So people became uncomfortable wearing it. Mm-hmm. But now, you know, you see them all over the place at all kinds of price points. And to me, that's what style is. It is, you know, those things that you bring into your wardrobe and remain, you know, that you can have them for 30 years and mm-hmm. they're still just as valid as the day that you bought them. Whereas, you know, fashion is just, it is literally that thing that we try to get fed, or that these brands try to feed people mm-hmm. 3-4 times a year. Like, yeah. Cycling. And if you buy something and you can't see yourself, you know, wearing it 10 years from now, then you probably shouldn't be buying that, because mm-hmm. You know, not to say it's not a good use of your money, but at this point, unless, you know, you're just sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever, like, you should look at your wardrobe as an investment.
For sure. So we're when you get here and you're in college and you're assessing yourself, and you said that the dad obviously was a huge influence on you. When did you say to yourself, like, when you looked in the mirror and was like, you got something, kiddo? You know what I mean? Because some of us haven't got to that part yet.
Yeah.
Some of us have. When was that moment for you?
You know, I said probably. Well, I was gonna say it's a lot recently, but I'd say I had that moment maybe 10, 11 years ago. So I mean, it's after graduation, after, you know, first job, and I still remember till this day kind of the turning point. I was going to some networking event, right? Some young professional networking event. And I got out of the car, put my jacket on, and I was like, this doesn't feel comfortable. This doesn't feel like how I want to make my first impression. And I didn't go into that event. And the very next day, I took that same suit to an alterations tailor. Like, I don't want too baggy. I don't want tight. I want it to fit right. And I think that's where I realized that, okay, this takes a lot of intentionality. It's not enough just to say, I'm wearing a suit, so I look good.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's I guess that was my epiphany. Like, all right, I'm not playing the game at the level that I wanted to.
So when you did that and you really started assessing your look and your style, and you went into that person who was going to start altering your suits and stuff like that. So how long after that you decided, hey, I need to actually invest in custom clothes completely? Because obviously when you're a kid back home, mom and dad was paying for that
right.
hookup.
Right.
So for you, when did you dig in the pocket and was like, ooh, man, I need to do that?
Man, I'll say it happened pretty quickly. I mean, it happened pretty quickly after that. Like you know, I got the first set of tailored or altered pieces back, and I'm like, man, if this looks like this, what does custom look like, right? And this is a terrible analogy, but it's almost like drugs. Like you get that gateway drug, and you're just kind of okay. I don't want, you know, I'm not getting the same high from this stuff anymore. Like I want to, you know what this feels like. And once you get, you know, you get hooked. I mean, I'd say it was probably a matter of, you know, 3 to 4 months. And this wasn't like, oh, you know, I definitely wasn't making custom clothing money, but I'm like, all right, we're about to start saving for this stuff because I want to try it. I see what it looks like. And that very first suit is still hanging downstairs in storage.
Really?
Like, you know, I probably, I'll say I wear it maybe once a year, but I will never let that suit go because, you know, it really means something. And it is a reminder to me of what happens, what you can do when you get something that is well made, because I'm definitely not the same size that I was when I got it.
Sure.
But because it's well made and all of those considerations were taken in, I can tell you that my alterations tailor is probably tired of seeing that suit right now. You know, but he knows, okay, and take this in, let that out, like, and he keeps everything that allows it to be able to do that. And that's one of the advantages that you get with custom clothing, that, you know, if you go to the right person and it's done right, you can make that thing last.
That's interesting. So tell me about this suit, man. What does it look like? Is that classic navy? Is it gray?
No.
What is
it? Again, you know, the first custom suit, the discipline definitely was not as present, but you know, I was in banking at the time, so it couldn't be too flashy. So it's sort of this mid-gray pinstripe suit, right? And with just very faint stripe going through it. And you know, I think I had like a custom gray, yellow, and white shirt made with, you know, banker's collar and contrast cuffs. And I mean, you couldn't tell me anything when I broke that thing out the first, you know, go around. And so it's, you know, again, it was something that it allowed me to be able to wear it. It has the versatility, but to your point, like as a first custom suit now, knowing what I know, it's like, okay, I probably would have gone with a navy or just you know, something solid that I could have got a lot more use out of right away versus, you know, this special occasion suit, which is really what it was.
It's interesting that that we can have those sentimental pieces that we hold on to. It has its own story, and then I'm sure at some point you're gonna have that conversation with your daughter. This was the suit, babe, that Dad wore.
Like, this suit has seen some things, has been through some things, like, you know,
If that suit could tell stories, man, I bet you.
You'd
be in trouble, man. So you mentioned, you know, finance and banking. So what I find is that a lot of individuals in finance and banking, they're really into suiting. You know, obviously there's a language that needs to be spoken when it comes to that industry. What were some things that you would see that you say, okay, I need to make sure I either go down this path as far as what I'm wearing in this industry versus what I shouldn't wear and why it makes sense?
You know, interestingly enough, banking is, I mean, it's super conservative, right? So for the most part, I mean, it was very much your solids, your, you know, your pinstripes and the navies and grays, and then the shirts were just your typical white and blues. But you know, the thing that I know that was consistently missing was fit. This idea of fit. And, you know, when as a banker, there's a very specific perception or image that you want to cultivate, especially if you are a banker who is in the space of asking people for money. Less people trying to get money out of you and asking you for money, right? Or you asking them for money, like investment banking. Okay. That you have to project a sense of confidence and success already, right? And so for me, that was a huge part of it because, you know, I graduated college at 20. I went into banking 21. And so nobody is trying to give the black kid that looks like a kid money. Yeah. But when, you know, you project that you seem successful, now they can go, well, this person is dressed well in a way that communicates a very specific sort of sense of success, and they're young, so they must be really, really good at what they do, right? And so you connect those dots for people, whether or not they recognize that it's even happening. And you almost tap into this sense of geniushood, as it were, like, okay, that's not, you know, I want to give this person something because they clearly know something that I don't know because I wasn't doing this at that age and finding success. Meanwhile, the whole time, like, I can't do any of this math in my head. Give me that calculator. Like, but it's very much about parents as well.
You know, I tell guys all the time, like, especially for men of color in particular, it's really important that we be effective nonverbal communicators. And you just exactly described that, like speaking without saying a word, confidence, your posture, your movement, and obviously your language. Those things are so important, and we're already judged, you know, from the time that we walk in or the time that person walks into your office. Yeah. You know, what would you tell that guy, you know, who's out there, like, man, this is why it's important? Because some people, there's a disconnect, like you said. You're in St. Louis, and there's still a disconnect today, in 2020. Why is that so important, and what are they missing? Help connect those dots.
Yeah, you know, for me, it is an awareness that unconscious bias exists, right? So the minute that someone walks into a room, whether or not even the person is conscious of the fact that they are running this evaluation, their brain has already begun pattern mapping you, right? Based on how you walk into the room, what you're wearing. And people are always seeking to categorize you into a bucket that makes it easy for them to understand you and how to engage with you. And so when you think about your style, your presentation, the overall package, you also need to do so with intentionality around how you want people to view you. Like, knowing that the default setting is that they're automatically going to start putting you into some bucket, you need to make a decision about what that bucket that you want them to put you into is. And that bucket can be different for whatever scenario or whatever it is that you're going into, right? I call it situational awareness. So if I'm meeting with X person, these are the things that I want them to begin thinking the minute I walk in. Or if I'm going here, these are the things that I want them to begin thinking. And then you craft that appearance, or you craft that approach to align with that, because again, it will begin automatically whether or not you like it. So you might as well as be the one to create it.
That's good. You know, there's so many people out there who have that perception of, you know, take me as I am, and it don't matter what people think. It matters what I think about me, not that perception. But you and I know that I would assume like the older we get, the more mature we get, the more mature in our thinking and the more conversations we have, we might come to the terms of realizing how many opportunities we were missing because of the way that we're dressing, and also how many, you know, all intents and purposes, negative things that come our way because of how we're dressed. You know what I mean? It's like, it really bothers me that we have to have this kind of, you know, guard up, if you will, automatically have to put on this armor. It's a beautiful thing, but we have to be so intentional as a culture to really put that at the forefront. Besides the knowledge,
yeah,
you know, we need to make sure that we have that armor on. So what were you going to say?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, I think too often it has become conflated with this idea of respectability politics. Like, you know, I can say that, I can honestly say that I don't care what people think about me. I care about what I want, what I've made you think about me. Mm-hmm. Right. So
break that down.
People aren't aware, you know, most people aren't self-aware enough of how they come to conclusions about others. And if I am the one shaping what your conclusion about me is, then for me, it's a matter of, have I been successful in what I want, in creating what I want you to think of me, right? So it's almost kind of like the whole three sides to a story thing, right? Like there's the one side, the other side, and then what actually happened. Very few people get to the what actually is part, right? So to me, I care about, in most interactions, what I want you to perceive. And that, I think, takes a certain amount of intentionality. So not that, you know, the thought is no longer your own, but I am molding this thing, right? And you walk away with what I want you to know, what I want you to think, what I want you to do next as a result of that interaction that we've had. And that's, you know, it's a little bit different from this idea of, well, I got to dress a certain way so that I'm not seen to be less than, or that, you know, I'm respectable. Like I don't care about that. Like that's just baked in, you know. But too often, I think there are these conversations about, well, you just be able to wear whatever you want to wear and do whatever you want to do. Like, don't push respectability politics. And I'm like, I don't necessarily see it as that. You know, I think it is very carefully curating who you are.
I love that. It's really important. Hence, you know, your moniker, right? You know, curated man is so important. In recent years, there's this noise when it comes to men's style or menswear. With, in my opinion, on twofold. You have the $300 suit, you know, and those the explosion, if you will, of clothiers, you know, designing or tailoring or measuring for the $300 suit. And then you have the group that not only is focused on colors and patterns, but then fit is off, outfit sprayed on, you know what I mean? And you're starting to look like a character. You're looking like a superhero's uniform. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so let's talk about that. So what are people missing here? And why is it more important to really curate the look instead of going to Instagram or going to, you know, seeing some guy out there, a popularity, you know, contest of what's popular?
Yeah. You know, for me, one of the first parts of it, again, it goes back to, you know, what's the message that you want to send? Like, is your point, hey, look at me, I'm wearing a suit and, you know, it's bright and, you know, I'm standing out. You know, it's like, how do you get to this idea of standing out while fitting in. I think too many people focus on the standing out part. And then there's sometimes this instant gratification piece that comes in where people want to get to a specific look without doing the work or making the investment, right? So the reason that you got a whole bunch of so-called clothiers offering $300 suits is because there are people out there who want to spend $300 and say that they're wearing custom clothing. And so where there is, demand, there will always be someone to provide supply. And it totally misses the mark of sustainability and actually getting beyond this one-time wear thing that people find themselves in. I remember seeing something a while back where the person was they were talking about why they charge what they charge, and it was basically you're not paying me just for the service I'm providing in the moment. You're paying me for the years of experience and education and investment that it's taken me to be able to do this for you now, right? You're not just paying for the cloth and the buttons and all of that. You're paying for me spending 10 years learning how to measure properly, right? And if you are someone who actually, cuts and sews, you're paying me for learning how to cut and sew and provide said product to you. And too many people miss that gap. Like they see their clothiers almost in the same way that they see H&M. It's just that you in there with a tape measure, but they expect you to be able to pull it out and go, here you go. You've got it, and that's that. And that's not, to me, that's very, very much fashion.
So when we look at American menswear, American tailoring, are there any publications or individuals that you look to and you're like, for so long, we've been kind of drawn or given so much clout and glory to, Europe, Italy, England, but American, we move the needle in a lot of ways, especially when I think you go from, obviously music, art, style comparative to fashion, if you will, in my humble opinion. Are there anyone out there, any publications that you're seeing on the American side of things that you like, this is something worth me, inquiring about, reading, studying?
Oh man, to be honest, man, no. Right now there's a lot of sort of regurgitation of style from Europe, right? And not to say anything is wrong with that. Like, I love Italian tailoring, man, but it's almost like now there's no originality in the U.S. in terms of that. And let me not say that. There are some people who are doing innovative things, right? And I'm talking about that in a second. But like your GQs, your Esquires, they are just here to push product at this point in time. Like, there's nothing unique that they're offering you or educating you on or any of that. Like, I like the Rake magazine. I like to look at it. But it's still very much an European influence, right? And so, I like to see now that there are things like real black menswear that my guy is doing, that is...
Shout out to Jay.
Yeah, that Jay is doing that is working to fill that gap. And then when I look at people that are here and being innovative in what they're doing, my guy, Rich Fresh, like, he's taken this idea of tailoring and the tracksuits, and like he's doing something unique with that I'm like, man, I want that. Like, you know, that is a unique addition to my wardrobe that I would like to have. And then, you know, Dan with Articles of Style, like you know, working to do manufacturing here in the US and come up with innovative ways to get people tailored. Like, that's really cool to see, but you know, that's not the stuff that you're necessarily going to see your GQs and your Esquires pushing. And unfortunately, far too many people still kind of rely on those magazines for style advice, fashion advice, whatever it is they call themselves doing over there.
I agree with you 100%. And everyone you talked about, you know, I agree. I think, you know, Fresh, you know, and Jay, you know, Jay is creating this platform for us to really see, you know, Black men in particular in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, unless you're of those eras, right? Yeah. You know, otherwise we have this new generation who's never really talked about or seen, you know, the Sammy Davises, the Miles Davis, you know, the individuals who shook things. Nat King Cole,
yeah,
you know, just really was the guy. James Brown, you know, amazing style, and so many people bit their style, you know, right. It became the common clothing approach, but they kind of was almost like, you know, kind of swept under the rug, like not giving their just due as far as their influence.
Yeah. And I, you know, I think we as Black people absolutely have a responsibility to give the same type of legitimacy that we've given to these other publications to publications like what Jay is trying to do, right? Like,
you
know, we can't just focus on, well, you know, those folks have been doing it for a while, and that's the source of truth. Like, sometimes you have to tell your own truth, and you have to put it out there, right? And you got to give it support. You know, that sometimes can just be harder than it needs to be in our community. But it's like, we got to give it that support and that love and that legitimacy that can allow it to grow into something that has the same type of voice.
100%, I agree with that. You and your wife went to Tokyo.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit about shoe game. Yeah. So these guys are doing some cool things with shoes. What tell us about your experience there and what kind of influence and inspiration you found in Tokyo.
Japan is cool, man. Like, and Tokyo is so vibrant that, you know, just the energy. It's like it's funny because for me it was like a less stressful New York, where people were really on top of, you know, they actually care about style, even though it's not as in your face in some places, but they're also like pushing, they're pushing the barriers, they're pushing the curves, like trying different things out and just infusing color and bringing those things together in ways that, you know, are actually exciting to me. You know, like the hottest brands are, and maybe I was just late to the game, but you know, the hottest brands that I'm interested in are coming out of Japan. Like your rain jacket, I'm like, man, I've yet to see something that these folks are doing that I'm like, it's hot, like, you know, and it's just seeing maybe that new energy that they are bringing is something that definitely contributes to it. But and great food, you know, some of the most polite people in the world, and it's, you know, when you give respect, like we don't speak Japanese, but we made sure to learn, you know, some of those critical things, and you could tell the response just from making the effort, right? You go to a country where, a pregnant women and kids, like there's a dedicated elevator for you in a department store because they care,
Mm-hmm.
versus here where it just feels like, every man for himself, right?
Yep.
Type thing. And so totally different type of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we were definitely sort of like the raisins in the milk, you could, it wasn't in a way necessarily that is as oppressive as it can feel here sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I remember being in Tokyo 20 years ago when I was in the Navy and just walking through the streets. And to your point, it's busy as New York,
Yeah.
but you still can move. It's like a smooth move, like you're gliding through the city.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. Versus crashing into it, which is what you feel like you're doing in New York. Yep. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, when we talk about services that are provided when it comes to, design and fashion or style, and you're getting, tailored suits and things of that nature. When we look from a cultural standpoint, because I always want to bring things to the forefront when we talk about the culture, right? What are some gaps that we're having when it comes to providing services, presenting, the next level expectation that you might find from someone else
Mhm.
or some other communities? What are some things that we can do to change the narrative? Because a lot of times I don't want to buy nothing from our people. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They don't take things seriously. They don't do this
Yeah.
way. What are some things from your experience, all these years of buying custom clothing and being on the forefront of style? What are you seeing, and what can we do? Because we need to make that voice be heard, and I think that we can add to. Sometimes some people just need to know. They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. On so two things, one on each side of the fence. One is, being willing to pay people for their work, man. Like
Mm,
stop trying to get a discount or, whatever it is. Like pay people for their work because it demonstrates a respect for what they do, the quality
mm,
of the product.
mm,
And then on the other side of it is be willing to do the work to be good at what you do, right? Like it's not
mm,
enough for you to show up with a tape measure and say I'm a custom clothier. What what have you done? Like how have you educated yourself? And I'm not talking about formal education,
yeah.
right? You don't need to be a master tailor or a cutter or anything like that, but what have you done to master your craft? Because tailoring is a craft, right? Even if all you're doing is taking those measurements and putting them into a system, like you should know what to expect when a product arrives. Like if you're using some factory or whatever, wherever, like you should have an intimate understanding of the tolerances in what they make for you, so that even though it's not exactly the measurements you took, when it comes back, it doesn't end up looking off because they kind of did their own thing. And you said, okay, I put my measurements in, but I didn't adjust because I didn't adjust them because I did not know that my factory, has a 2-inch tolerance or whatever, that they interpret these measurements differently. And
Mm,
that to me is a critical piece, and I'm not a custom clothier. It's not something that I necessarily want to do, but I've taken the time and invested my own resources to travel and talk to tailors and visit, people who are making things by hand in different countries and understanding the process that goes into the product, right?
mm,
So I wouldn't expect anything less from the clothier that I'm working with. I with the exception of that very first suit that I talked about earlier, every single custom piece of clothing that I own has been made for me through a person of color. And
mm.
you know, that that just reaffirms like people are out there, but you've got to be willing to seek them out. You've got to be willing to pay them for the work, and you've got to be willing to cultivate that relationship.
That's amazing. You know, I was sitting here thinking about the knowledge and the time that's spent for you. So we talk about one thing is that custom clothier or that tailor and their education and their time and experience. But as a consumer, being an educated consumer about what to expect in the process. And usually from my humble experience, people spend more time and have more knowledge about their sneakers, right?
Yeah.
Than that knowledge of why a garment will cost them as much as it. What are the things that you should be aware of, you know, when you're purchasing a custom suit. So based on body type, and we all have different body types, and you know, what are some things that you're looking for that people should be aware of? Let's talk about like your body type. You know, what are some things that guys should kind of say, you know what, I need to be aware and I should be looking into these things when it comes to, you know, getting a custom suit?
You know, for me, it's the shoulders, right? Like when it comes down to a custom suit, and specifically the jacket, almost anything else can be taken care of easily or relatively easily, but the shoulders, not so much, right? That almost anyone will tell you getting work done to the shoulders of a jacket is almost the equivalent of major surgery on something, right? And so being aware of, you know, your shoulder slope and how that impacts how the sleeves, you know, fit, and whether or not you end up with dimples and so on and so forth, I think is important. And then, you know, just the overarching basics of fit, like what does a well-fitting jacket look like on you, because it's different for everybody, right? Again, you know, as a culture, we got to a point where we were like, all right, it's easier, it's more cost efficient to come up with these numbers and determine that every man should fit into one of these buckets from, you know, what I think the smallest size I've seen is a 32 up to 52R, and then we can get fancy and have shorts and longs in between there. But if you're going custom, like understanding where you fall in sort of that range and how that translates too, right? Like, you know, I was talking to some guy the other day, and he was like, yeah, you know, so for ready to wear, I'm sort of a 39.5. You don't hear 39.5 if you go into a department store. Good finding that, right? But this is someone who understands their measurements and how it would translate on kind of the standard size chart. So I think, you know, knowing that about how you want your shoulders to fit, how that impacts the rest of the drape of your jacket and your pants. Pants, for the most part, you know, if the fabric is there, they can be altered all the day long. But, you know, getting that jacket right is huge.
Good. Well, brother, we are rounding up our time together. Hey, man, it's when you're having a conversation with family, man, it can go by quick, you know?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, man. Thanks for reaching out and inviting me to do this.
Absolutely. It was an honor and a pleasure. You know, we can break bread virtually, but, you know, it's one of those things where we need to do this more often. We need to have more conversations as a culture, as a family, as a ummah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We need that. And those of us who are, whether you just want to transcend your current style, or you want to learn more, or you want to grow, fellowship is so important. So I just want to thank everyone tonight for hopping on to Jump School tonight with my good brother Wale. And here at Jump School, I'm Ihsaan. the Style Jumper. You guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you on the next one.
I hope you enjoyed today's amazing interview. Today's episode was brought to you by my new book, Why Style Matters, The Mindset of Dressing Well and How It Impacts Your Life. To get your autographed copy, click the link in the description.